About 1,000 views so far on the on our little thing that we did yesterday, the Francis thing. So, yeah, and I've been talking offline with him too, just trying to help because the whole Pat McAfee thing is real. Like ESPN realized men like you and Matt and me, I'm not going to be offended because somebody said, "Hey, you're having sex." Ah. And I think, like you said, there's a fine line to make sure that we're like a little bit edgier on that show, but also we have a gigantic company that we don't want to steamroll over because somebody says something. So it not being live, I think, is quite the move. Bring more people to the circus. Even Matt, he opened the show by saying, like guys like us love football. He's like, we haven't gotten fucking laid since February. No sex for 6 months, and last night's game week, and that's like how it started. But I have friends checking in. We have like almost 1,000 views, and we recorded it yesterday. So for the first show, and it's on the Odd Chopper, it's not on our primary channel. We'll see how it goes. Basically, Ben and the team gave us about a month, a couple weeks, work it out and see if we can put something together that sticks. If not, we'll try again. There's more stuff to talk about. I don't know. I think it's such a good thing for the show. Just what's going on in Colorado, and like, is that edge? How long is that going to last? Is him getting these? All right, I'm gonna throw mics hot. Mics are going hot. Mics are hot. All right. Once this music kicks back. All right, Ben. We will go to you in 5, 4, 3, 2.
All right, we're back. What do you think? We were going to pack it up after a couple weeks? Absolutely not. Week 2, college football, live before lock. About 58 minutes to kickoff, so we got a lot to get to. 13 games on this beautiful slate. Some marquee matchups, some lopsided matchups, some made-up schools, everything that we would want and more. I am Ben Rasa. Matt Gajewski's with me. We've got some fun, exciting things. We're going to talk about some sponsors, some deals, things you need to know. Of course, we're going to give you all the all the info you need to be successful today in college football. Sir, how you feeling week 2? You ready to go? You're ready to go.
Yeah, man, I'm really excited for this slate. We talked about this on Betting You. It's a lot of really good games, high profile games. It extends beyond the main slate. The night slate is going to be pretty good as well. Make sure you check out that. But yeah, I'm excited for football all day, man.
Absolutely. And again, we just have so much to get to. It's fascinating. Before we even dive into the slate, you see it on the left-hand side. We've got all the games. And we go, teams on the right or at home. Look at all the plus. Look how many live dogs potentially there are. I was stunned. My first reaction to this slate, there are a lot of teams at home that are expected to lose today. That is always an interesting wrinkle because normally early in the year, it seems to me, and you can disagree, of course, that most of the teams at home would be big favorites, but that's not the case in week 2.
No, we got a couple like really interesting games, like the Texas A&M game. You've got a road favorite there, but then like some pretty good teams traveling to weird spots. Like Auburn's on the road against Cal. That's not on the main slate, but you mentioned a lot of interesting ones. Like Virginia probably isn't normally an underdog to James Madison, and they're at home. So you do have some pretty decent FCS teams and some pretty decent G5 teams on the slate, which I like, especially the G5 teams. And they are dogs, but I mean, it's going to be interesting. Notre Dame at NC State, that's another one of these. I laid the points there just for the betting markets, but overall, I think it's probably going to lead to some volatility. A lot of people seem to be buying these home dogs, and maybe that gives us some sort of edge for DFS too.
Well, let's find out right now. Again, if you're just joining us, hit that like button, subscribe. Let's get the vibes going. But let's start with Notre Dame. You just mentioned you like them. They are on the road. Weird game. NC State, we saw them a little bit against UConn. We've seen Notre Dame destroy 2 opponents. I would think it's pretty clear that NC State is the best opponent they've played, but it's still just a 7.5 point spread, 49.5 point total. Let's start with Notre Dame. Do you expect a different role for Hartman today? Do you expect a different profile or attack, considering this is going to be a much more competitive game?
Yeah, I do. And right away, week 2, I think there's some volatility in projections in general. So when you're using the projections today, I would keep this in mind. A team like NC State has a new OC in Robert Anae. It's not the typical NC State offense we've seen in previous years. Notre Dame also has a new OC. They haven't shown a ton. I don't think they'll be the fastest team or the pass heaviest team, but they played Navy and East Tennessee State. We just flat out don't know how they're going to play in a competitive game. So there is a little bit of volatility here. Maybe they do play faster than you think. Maybe NC State throws more than they did in week 1. Those are going to be things that I think you can use to your advantage and not just play like the stone chalk in every single game, which leads me to the Notre Dame side. They're a 7-point favorite here, but I don't think Audric Estime, their running back, is going to be particularly owned. It's nothing against him. It's just because we have Judkins and Michigan running backs and Ray Davis and some guys in really good spots. But Estime still has 31 touches through 2 games. That would have been much higher had they played competitive opponents. And he's participating in a good amount of the routes too. When games are actually competitive, I think they sort of bite down and play Estime in a larger role. So immediately he's one of these players I'm looking to for tournaments, specifically as a pivot off the other expensive backs, as someone who's not going to come in as a particularly owned back. I do think Hartman is used more as well. He only has 1 design rush attempt through 2 games. That was not how he was used with Wake Forest. He can run. He does have good mobility. And that probably gets unleashed to a degree in more competitive games. The quarterback slate is pretty bad, and they're all priced way up. So right away, a guy like Hartman, I think in that mid 8Ks is going to go under-owned as well, and nobody's going to play his pass catchers. Now, this is probably just a sprinkling for tournaments, nothing you want to get super overweight on because the total still pretty low. But I do think this whole Notre Dame team is pretty under-owned in the context of this slate.
I always ask this at some point, so might as well get it out of the way. Do you anticipate, even though maybe quarterbacks are priced at the premium, having 2 quarterbacks in the large majority of your lineups today?
On DraftKings, I do not.
Okay, interesting. So this is another super flex where we can be creative.
Yeah, and that's going to lead us to like a hyper chalk Jeff Sims later too. And anytime you put Jeff Sims and chalk in the same sentence, you should be pretty weary of that. But yeah, a lot of that comes down to quarterbacks are all priced way, way too expensive. And I mean, guys with questions. So just to kind of like rattle through a few, you've got like Jackson Dart. Does he play the whole game? Do they use Spencer Sanders? I'm not sure. Shedeur Sanders, awesome game, but he's played one game at the FBS level. I mean, like Brennan Armstrong's really expensive. He ran a lot, but he played horribly from a passing perspective in week 1. So I mean, I think you can go down to some guys like Hartman as contrarian plays because your chalk is like pretty weak today, and it's all really expensive. But back to the 4RB conversation, you've got quarterbacks with questions all priced way up, and then you've got like Rashina Lee at 4,800. Donovan Edwards at 6.8. Even Ray Davis at 7.7, I think, is underpriced. The lead back for Kansas State's 5.8. Judkins is only 8.1. There's a lot of decently priced backs, and then there's some pretty cheap ones as well. So your 4 running back is live today. We know that's typically an under-owned build. I will be trying to exploit that.
On the other side of this specific game, you already mentioned Brennan Armstrong. Yeah, if he's going to flirt with 100-yard bonuses, he's going to get there a lot of the times. But against Notre Dame's defense, are they going to allow a guy to do that? Because, passing-wise, he was a non-factor. And certainly this is not UConn that he's facing here. Is he playable, maybe tournaments? And if you do play him, are you running him naked?
I think you can play him in tournaments, but at that price, I think he probably needs to do something through the air. I mean, last week he had just an absurd rushing role. He had 9 designed attempts, but then he scrambled 10 times. So that's what really got him to a lot of that rushing ability. So he had 1 sack in 10 scrambles. Notre Dame's pass rush is much better than UConn's. I anticipate more of those being turned into sacks. You're just not going to have the ability to run all over a Notre Dame defense. And I guess last thing on Notre Dame, NC State allowed 6.2 yards per carry to UConn. A lot of that came on 1 carry from Victor Rosa, but it's not exactly a tough matchup behind that elite Notre Dame offensive line for Audric Estime. Anyway, Armstrong, a little expensive. I do think there is significant downside. NC State's O-line did not look great. Allowed a ton of pressure, only 2.6 yards per carry for this Notre Dame defense. I don't think Armstrong's going to have as much room to run here. So I do think he's risky. But at the same time, I'm trying to just diverge from this hyper-condensed chalk around Jeff Sims in any way I can. So I still do have some Armstrong. I did make a stacking rule with him because I do think at 9,200 to access a ceiling, you probably need a receiver. The only one I really want to play is Conception. Their routes were spread basically all over the place outside of him, which I don't particularly like. If I were going to a 2, it would be Keon Lassane. And then I have very little interest in this backfield. They finally made the right decision. I've been waiting for them to do this for years. Listing Jordan Houston as a co-starter with Michael Allen. So finally, Michael Allen, the more efficient back, maybe gets some run here, but I don't anticipate it being a full workload.
Anything else from this game?
I don't be careful with it. Total's low. Think there is some room for upside, but to get over the field, I don't think you need to take massive stands.
Well, we'll get through the second one pretty quickly here because this is a 40.5 point total. James Madison and Virginia. I actually like James Madison in the game. They're a good team. They transitioned to this level of playing these type of schools very, very well last year, and they've got some talent. But for DFS, I'm not sure how much we can really actionably play them. Maybe there are some cheapies. Maybe there's some guys. Talk to me about what you see in this game.
I sprinkled a little bit of their quarterback, Jordan McLeod. They did a great job last year with Todd Centeo, who had been largely a failure at the FBS level until he went to James Madison. McLeod's been the exact same. He's been all over the country. I think played the most with Arizona, but he has a little bit of mobility. He's 5K. So I think you can throw a dart here. Otherwise, Kalon Black is a guy I'm playing a decent amount of at 4,200. They absolutely crushed an FCS team in week 1. Kalon Black only carried 12 times, still at 125 yards. I'm anticipating them condensing the running back workload in more competitive games, which is what we have here. Spread right around that touchdown mark. And then the total, the only thing you're worried about here is that it's really low. But Virginia got gassed on the ground in week 1 against Tennessee, over 5 yards per carry. James Madison's a quality team in the G5, the Sun Belt. Kalon Black, I think, is completely fine. The pass catchers I don't have a ton of love for. They don't pass a ton. They didn't last year. I don't think they're going to this year under McLeod. So Reggie Brown, Elijah Surratt, these are guys. I'm playing 150 today, so I have under 5% of a couple of these guys. Zach Horton I would include. But these aren't guys to really take a large stand on.
On the UVA side, again, it's just a tough year for Virginia. They're not expected to score a lot. You mentioned they were just outclassed by Tennessee. No surprise there. Anything on their front that we should notice?
Tony Muskett's warming up. I don't think that's good for DFS. I would rather play their freshman, Colin Drea, because he runs a little bit. Muskett's just a pocket statue. So I went back. I had a little bit of Colandrea because he was 4,700, but X'd out all the Virginia quarterbacks, not playing any of them. Running back is a horrific committee, not playing any of them. You could sprinkle maybe like a Malik Washington at 4,300, but I do think there's significant downside to playing a team with a sub 17 implied team total. So I would, if you're playing a couple lineups, I would just X out Virginia.
Moving on. Interesting game. Purdue's taking some money here. It's down to 1.5 at some points. They are in Blacksburg, take on Virginia Tech. 49-point total, so nothing crazy. But let's start with the Purdue side. Not the best start to the Hudson Card era. I'm not saying it was his fault, but they did go down to Fresno. We've got him. We've obviously got a running back in Maccabee that can play for sure. With Purdue, what are the priorities and how important is this team?
I was encouraged to see them still play really fast and pass a ton in week 1. Part of that out of necessity, but it's a Graham Harrell offense. I don't think they're going to be quite as air raid as they were under Braum, but I'm still anticipating this being pretty friendly for DFS purposes. Card can run a little bit. He's 6K, so he's really cheap. I actually think he's a pretty good pivot off of Jeff Sims, and his pass catchers are way too cheap. This is like stone chalk. You really need to navigate here. Total's low at 49.5. It's coming back up, and I think there's reasons for that. Purdue's going to play pretty fast, and they're going to pass a lot. Virginia Tech's strength is defense, but I really hesitate to say strength. I don't know if this team has many of them. But Burks is going to be hyper owned. I think he's going to be the most owned receiver on the slate. He did participate in 100% of the routes. The guy's explosive. I forget the name of this analytics account on Twitter, but they use AI to track miles per hour for these guys. And Deion Burks, he was in the top 5 of any player last week, just on that long touchdown catch he had. So hyper speed, hyper explosive. I think you could pivot directly to Abdur-Rahman Yassin, 94% of the routes. If you're looking for a contrarian pivot, TJ Sheffield played a ton too. Otherwise, you could just ignore him for a little bit, but that's tournament specific. For cash games, he should be one of the first guys in your lineup. Maccabee's fine. He's going to have a nice role. Dylan Downing will spell him. I don't think he's like on the borderline of cash, I think, in my opinion, but I would rather just find the extra salary play like Judkins and guys like that.
On the other side, again, Old Dominion, not a juggernaut, but Grant Wells looked competent, certainly had a little mobility. I want to ask you about that. This is a guy who transferred in whatnot. Not that he's not Armstrong, but he scored on the ground, had 7 for 27. Is that something to expect? Is he playable, and is Virginia Tech as a whole playable?
I'm probably not going to play a lot of this team, trying to be really careful with them, because I think Old Dominion's probably a bottom 10 team in the country. Ooh. When you include all the G5 teams. Wells historically is not mobile. His career average for yards per carry is 2. So last week, kind of an anomaly for him. I do think this is a tougher test, even though Purdue's defense doesn't necessarily scare you. The guy I want to look to most is Bayshul Tootin, and he had 55 yards on 19 attempts against Old Dominion. So I still have questions about Virginia Tech's offensive line. I don't think they're going to be particularly efficient against more competitive teams, but the workload was there. The other thing I'm concerned about here is really close spread. If Purdue gets up in this game, do we still see him with that role? Because Malachi Thomas still played a decent amount. Malachi Thomas participated in 36% of the routes. I think this could be a sneaky timeshare, and with how bad Tootin was, maybe you see Thomas take on an extra role. With the pass catchers, I don't know how Allie Jennings got to 7 or 6.7K. It's just a laughable price tag for a guy in such a bad situation. Jalen Lane's pretty expensive too. Maybe you could get to like a rogue Daquan Felton, but I don't have any Virginia Tech. I don't think Xing them out's a terrible idea.
For Virginia Tech, do you have a feel on the game? Hokies moving to 2-0, or are they going to lose?
I wanted to bet the over, but I was just asleep at the wheel on like Wednesday when they started taking money.
Yeah.
So I didn't take it at the current number.
I missed the window as well for all bets on this game, but 3 down, 10 to go. I do want to say, though, it's this college football, and we're going to get to everything that you need, but the NFL is tomorrow. And I would be crazy not to tell you about some of the exciting news around here. You'll see it tomorrow, but I want to give you some time to make sure you are aware of what's going on at Owner's Box. We've teamed up with them, a site that's emerging, obviously growing in popularity, and what we've done, in addition to all the things that they're offering, the up to a $500 first match deposit bonus, all that good stuff, we have built our sim tools and our contest generator and all that stuff that you've heard about. Owner's Box is integrated into that. So if you sign up over there, not only are you getting the first match deposit bonus, we are going to give you, and this is just through tomorrow, we're going to give you a month of the sim tools are NFL package. That is what's been going on. Again, a great deal. So if you're looking to get inside the ropes, this is a $199 a month package that you will get for free for a month. Again, the link is in the description. Check it out. Not to mention one more thing, if I don't need to sweeten it anymore, there's going to be overlay. When you get over there, and I signed up very, very recently just to take advantage of all this. Obviously, I already have the tools, but I wanted the first match deposit bonus. There are contests. There's a lot of spots left. So this is going to be one of the softest spots to play NFL, I think, for this foreseeable future. I like the format. I can use our tools, and you can get our tools in addition to all the perks over at Owner's Box. My man Mike just threw it in the chat. Sign on up. Be smart. Take advantage. If you're playing any NFL volume tomorrow, at least consider getting over there. And again, 100% deposit match up to 500 plus the free NFL sims. That is a deal that you want to take advantage of. So shout out to Owner's Box sponsoring this show. Shout out to Troy for going to the Little Apple to take on Kansas State. Pretty big spread, nothing crazy, but we're talking north of 2 touchdowns. I've seen this bouncing around between basically 14.5 and 16. A 50-point total. We'll start with Troy. Seems like a pretty tough spot for them.
For sure. Gunnar Watson, you can X out. He just takes too many sacks. He'll be better in Sunbelt matchups, but not here. Their receiver rotation was pretty nasty. You still had Jabari Barber leading the way, but you didn't see a lot of Stoudemire. That surprised me. Kamani Vidal has an awesome role. He had, they played an FCS team, so take this for what it's worth. Over 200 rushing yards on 24 carries. He's also their pass catching back. But you're kind of towing the line here. What does the efficiency look like? What's the scoring expectation for Vidal? There's a lot of good backs. He sprinkled in my lineups, but that's about it with Troy.
On the other side, Kansas State, for a lot of years that we've been doing this, they're always on the slate. And we talked about even when they had Deuce Vaughn and whatnot, they just play so methodical. The receivers are usually not playable. Talk about their quarterback. We just had a question about him. Even as a couple touchdown favorite, are there core pieces from Kansas State today?
Yeah, I like Will Howard for tournaments. He's sort of like, I don't think talent-wise he's like Sam Hartman, but for the purposes of this slate, with so much condensed ownership on Jeff Sims, I think you can play Will Howard at lower ownership, and I don't think you really need to take a big stand here to get over the field. He does have mobility. They played an FCS team in week 1, so they didn't need to show that. And he's been efficient as a passer. The only thing that has me weary is this offense is slow. It's pretty run heavy, and he's 8,900. So there's other quarterbacks I like more with an easier path to a ceiling than Will Howard. But I think he should at least be included because, I wouldn't be surprised if Jeff Sims comes in like over 50% owned today. The backfield's interesting. Basically a 60-40 split between DJ Giddens and Florida State transfer Trayshawn Ward. Giddens is cheaper, so it's a pretty easy play there, but Ward's going to be involved. If you're looking for like a really deep tournament guy, if they absolutely slaughter Troy, he's going to see work too. I don't have a ton of interest in the receivers. Keegan Johnson's been injured for them. I think Benson knows the safest. The tight end, 4,500. Still not a good price tag on him. Usually you'd like to see him around that 4K range for a tight end, but as far as they go, he's pretty explosive. So as far as a pass catcher for Kansas State, it'd be Sano or pass, and he's the guy I'm playing with Howard.
That's okay. Perfect. So that's kind of the pairing up. And if you do that, not that it's an end all be all, but you don't mind not having a Troy run back, right?
I don't think I have any Troy outside of a couple. I have 9 lineups of Vidal and not a ton of Will Howard. He's in 4. But again, I don't think I'm going to be over the field, but I think if you're running 150 and you hit like 8% Howard, you're probably over the field.
The next game has got quarterback issues on both sides of it. I wanted to bet this game, but it really was just kind of a guessing game. And we've done this 2 weeks in a row now. Cam Rising. Certainly didn't see him against Florida. Certainly didn't need him against Florida. So what's the situation there? And then on the other side, we'll talk about Blake Shapen, who is out. And what does Baylor do at quarterback? Because they just got handled by the team of destiny in Texas State. This is, in theory, a tougher opponent, but I don't really know. Utah's a 7-point road favorite, 47-point total. Talk about the Utes, talk about the Bears, talk about the QB situation.
Yeah, man, they should have put that Utah State game on the slate instead of Eastern Kentucky, an FCS team later. But I did end up playing Baylor. I bet them at 7.5 when we got news that Rising's not going to play. They'll split quarterback reps again here. Pretty clear. Bryson Barnes, the passer. Nate Johnson's basically wildcat guy, but that does hurt Barnes. Like, you can't play him. He's not going to run much. Micah Bernard's out. Quinton Jackson's banged up. I still think he plays and plays a decent amount. But you also saw Jalen Glover play a fair amount last game too. And with Nate Johnson, like, operating as this, like, he might just play running back today. I don't know. They might use a lot of Wildcat. So even with Bernard injured, I don't think there's a lot of juice to squeeze on the injury front because they're using that weird Wildcat stuff with Nate Johnson. The receiving situation's pretty bad here, especially without Rising. Like, he's so important to the spread. It's Thomas Yasmin, their tight end, or it's pass. Devon Bailey at 6.8. Don't love that. They're also, I thought we would see Pittman and Emery Simmons play a decent amount here. And Money Parks had an 81% route share, but they've got a 4-star freshman in Mikey Matthews. They got him on the field right away, 59% of the routes. He's going to see that number rise as he plays well. But the problem is he's 5,300, so we don't even have a discount on him. It's basically a pass on the Utah team for me.
On the other side, so again, we got to see Baylor really struggle, and now they've got a quarterback issue. Sawyer Robertson takes over. I don't know a lot about this guy. It looks like he can move a little bit. Do you expect the offense to change? And obviously going up against Utah's defense, there's still some ways to exploit them, but a 47-point total, how playable is he?
I think he's worth a dart in large field. We've talked about this a lot in the past. He's an unknown. So if he's awesome, he's never going to be 6.6K again. But there's a pretty good chance he sucks because he couldn't beat up Blake Shapen, who I don't really think highly of. But he's a 4-star recruit, Mississippi State transfer. So, I mean, Leach recruited this guy. I think there's at least some potential here to sprinkle him in lineups. He's under 5% for me, but he's in my pool. Receivers tough for this team. Drake Dabney, their tight end, and Keytron Jackson, the Arkansas transfer, are used the most here. Surprising to me, Monterey Baldwin, under 50% of the routes. They started a former walk-on over him in Jonah Burton, who actually played well. So I got to give Jonah Burton his flowers, but still, none of these guys enough routes to play. The backfield, I think, is going to swing back towards Richard Reese at some point. For some reason, that was something that Aranda really focused on in the postgame. We need to get Richard Reese more touches. The problem is he's never been a pass catcher, and he's not used on routes, and he wasn't in week one. They did use Dominic Richardson, the Oklahoma State transfer, over him. Richardson's cheaper, so if they get down in this game, which they're projected to, Richardson's the pass-catching back. You can sprinkle him, but otherwise I'll be out on Baylor outside of just a situational under 5% Sawyer Robertson stack, and that's with Keytron and Dabney.
Zach Walsh said, Vele is 5,600 on FanDuel. Any viability there? Better price.
Let me see if I have any of him. I don't recall having a ton, but yeah, he's definitely more viable over there. Little bit of him there. I'm not playing a ton of that game in general on either site.
We still have plenty of games left, but do you see any like super cheap wide receivers that maybe we want to mention?
Chris Brazzell for Tulane, Deion Burks for Purdue. There's not really like super awesome min price guys, but right around that 4K range is pretty healthy.
All right, well, here we go. This is what everybody's here for. Hit the like button for Colorado, for Deion, for poor Nebraska. How Nebraska blew that game. We honestly could have just done a show on that. They've been licking their wounds, and now they're thrown into just the circus of what's going on at Colorado. Credit to Colorado. I certainly did not see them winning against TCU, but they did. Crazy performances from Sanders, from Hunter, and from a lot of guys. Now it's a totally different situation. Colorado's at home. They're a slight favorite at 2.5 points, 58-point total. You've already mentioned Jeff Sims 3 or 4 times in this show. So it's pretty clear that he's obviously firmly in play. Looking at our ownership and our tools and our projections, which you can always get and access, you should. He's going to be extremely popular. How do we play this? I assume he's in cash as well.
Yeah, he's in cash. Tournament side, be careful because he sucks. But right away, his price is what does it here. Colorado's defense is not good. They don't have Slusher today. He's their nickel, probably their best defensive back outside of Hunter. And they weren't good against the pass either. They gave up a ton on the run. TCU averaged 7.1 yards per carry. Sims is an elite runner. He had 14 design attempts. They're going to use him as a runner. So right away, his floor is awesome because of that rushing ability. Even if he sucks as a passer, which he did last week, that floor is so good where he's very, very unlikely to give you a bad score. Where I question him for tournaments is where do we access that ceiling? They are underdogs here. I think he probably needs to punch in like 2 touchdowns on the ground to get you there. And another problem I have is their coaching staff talking about getting their backs more work. They want to work in Anthony Grant and Gabe Irving. They both were under 10 touches last week. So that immediately is a problem for me with Sims in tournaments. I would rather pivot and play some of the guys like Hartman who are in, I guess, uncertain situations ceiling-wise, but I think it's there if things break right for him. So cash, I'd play Sims. Tournaments coming in under own. I'll tell you where I'm at right now. I'm still playing him, but I am playing on DraftKings, 29% Sims. I'll be under the field, but still pretty heavily exposed. One way I think you could play him is stack him. I imagine a lot of people are going to play him naked. And again, I don't really have a lot of good things to say about Colorado secondary outside of Travis Hunter. They lost Isaiah Garcia Castaneda, who led their team in targets last week. Now I think that solidifies Marcus Washington, Alex Bullock, and Billy Kemp as their 3 receivers. Bullock was actually pretty efficient last week among these guys. You could throw a dart on him. Washington's cheap. Washington was injured all of training camp, so that's why he didn't play a ton in week 1. He was their wide receiver 2 last year. I don't hate stacking Jeff Sims as a contrarian avenue if you still want to play this game, because it's a good game. Like, people want to play Shedeur, the Colorado side. I want to play some Nebraska too. I just want to be really careful how I do it.
Is this the type of game we really haven't talked about anything in this realm? Is this a game stack potential where you've got Sanders and Sims together on teams?
You could definitely do that. Sanders, he's really hard to project, I think, ownership-wise, and, just flat-out projections because of that first game. But he doesn't project particularly well, price-adjusted. People still probably click him because it's Colorado. He had that awesome game. And then he took a bunch of sacks in week 1. This offensive line is horrible. He had one of the highest pressured rates in college football last week. And that's not going to change, even against Nebraska. But at Jackson State, he had decent mobility. So I'm trying to weigh this. How much does he run and scramble versus how bad this offensive line is? Because he's not throwing for 500 yards every week. As good as he is, that's just not happening. At 9,400, I'm still going to play some Sanders. The total's nice. I don't fear Nebraska's defense. He's easy to stack. The receiving core is very clear. Top 3, Hunter, Horn, Weaver. They're honestly in a pretty decent pecking order, too, to pick off. Weaver is going to be the most under-owned guy here. And I actually like that because Weaver outplayed Jimmy Horn every step of the way at UCF. And then Hunter, if this game gets out of control in one way or the other, Hunter is probably the guy that comes off the field because they need him for defense and other things in the offense. So right away, Weaver, I think, is a pretty decent GPP play. Otherwise, I think that's about it for Colorado. Their backfield makes me nervous. It's a big committee. Alton McCaskill is going to return at some point. We don't have news on him yet. I don't think he plays, but just watch it.
So, again, just to kind of put a bow on this, these are teams that kind of, for the field, are going to be more towards the top of the list. We had some questions in chat about if you're only playing a lineup or 2. I think these are the type of teams that you might want to consider if you're building out a stack. Both these quarterbacks firmly in play, but you mentioned Sims' popularity.
Absolutely. And again, you can play Sims. Just be cognizant of it. If you play Sims, maybe get contrarian elsewhere. For example, maybe you don't play Rasheen Ali, or maybe you play Estime instead of Ray Davis. So there's ways to do it.
Last question on this game. Any thoughts on Malachi Ullman for Nebraska? Flat min wide receiver.
Yeah, I wish they'd play him more. The dude's an elite recruit. He's their best receiver recruit, 4-star. Barely played in week 1. That's the only problem. I mean,
kind of just flying blind.
Rule did come out and say he wants to get some of their younger guys more time, and this makes sense. It's like a rookie in the NFL. But does that mean 25% of the routes, or does that immediately mean 50? I don't know. I would bet probably the former before the latter. He's a sick recruit, though. He should play over Bullock and these guys.
Well, we're going to find out.
There's no excuse not to play him.
No, there really isn't. There is. Who takes the win, Colorado or Nebraska? I've been asked that question many a times in our Discord today. Don't know. I'll say this. The time to bet Colorado was last week when they were plus. You knew it was going to cross through 0. I think Nebraska's got a pretty good shot, honestly.
I bet Colorado again, but my take it. I have not wavered on Colorado being better than the market suggests. People just ignore the fact that they brought in transfers. All you would hear all off seasons. Colorado lost 70 transfers. It's like, yeah, those guys all sucked, and they brought in 4 and 5 stars at every position. No, they're not deep, but it's week 2. None of them are hurt except Slusher.
No, it's true. God, Nebraska, whatever. It doesn't matter. Nebraska's Nebraska. You can't turn the ball over like they did last week with Minnesota. Those interceptions by Sims were unacceptable. So we will see what they put forward today. I know one thing for sure. Eastern Kentucky is on the slate. Probably the first and last time we get them. Normally I integrate the nickname. Not positive what that is. I think it's the Colonels, but I really don't know. I know they're 5 or 6 touchdown underdog, 35-point underdog, 59.5 point total. Does this team do, I don't know a thing about them. Do they do anything? Certainly we don't get to see them against competition. They lost by 53 points to Cincinnati to open the year.
Yeah, X them out.
Honestly, I don't want to get crazy. We maybe bet Kentucky. It seems a little light.
I haven't seen the current spread. My projections had it around 38. I think it opened at like 31.
Okay. Yeah.
What is it? What is the current spread?
I saw 35 when I put this together.
Oh, so they took some money.
Yeah.
They should. I mean, they're going to slaughter this team.
Cincinnati's no good.
And Kentucky gave us the cover of the century last week.
Oh my God.
That was so lucky.
So lucky. I needed more of that, but we'll take what we can get. All right. So Eastern Kentucky's gone. Kentucky, it's the age-old question. We talked about it a lot last week, not as much this week. If your guys are sitting on the sidelines in the fourth quarter, that means they can't accumulate points, but it also means that they had to get there some way. And if you score 7 touchdowns in the first half, well, you can get it done in one half. And that's what I want to know about Davis and Leary and whoever else you want to throw out for Kentucky. Or do you say 13 games is just not worth it?
I think this team is still working out some kinks on offense. They bring back Liam Cohn, but they have a transfer quarterback, and these guys played all the way till the final drive despite slaughtering Ball State last week. So maybe they play longer in the game than some other teams that aren't ironing as many things out. It's Eastern Kentucky, so I mean, the spread's really high. If it gets to 35 points, he probably comes out. But like you said, they had something to do with it on the way there. This team's slaughtering Ball State. They still passed 61.5% of the time. Again, unless you're ironing things out, that doesn't make any sense. They were really fast, top 40 in seconds per play. It's an attractive offense. They're playing their starters deeper in games. Eastern Kentucky's awful. They gave up 93 combined DFS points to the receivers for Cincinnati last year. And that was Emory Jones throwing them the ball. Now you have Leary, at least a bona fide starter. He doesn't run, but he's very live for a 300-yard bonus. Certainly playing him in tournaments. Their top 3 receivers, I don't see there being as wide of a gap as pricing indicates. Dane Key being the cheapest. I honestly probably would have priced all these guys at like 5-6 where Barry Brown is. Barry Brown led their team in receiving last year. Tavion got hurt. He was the high-profile transfer from Virginia Tech. But both Brown and Key are 4 stars. These are great receivers. I'm just trying to mix and match them. And then Ray Davis, I mean, what an elite workload for Ray Davis. 14 carries, just so involved in the pass game. Even with Kentucky passing more than we thought, he's going to be extremely involved in the pass game. 69% of the routes, finished with 19 touches, over 100 yards against a horrible team last week. He should be in your cash lineup.
Really? Oh, interesting. So you think he'll have a high enough floor even in a game that's going to get out of hand?
Yeah, last week got out of hand and he smashed.
It did. Yep.
I mean, it did take the last play of the game for him to get there, but this should be an easier matchup.
Oh, definitely going to be an easier matchup. Anything else from the directional school versus the actual state? That's never a good situation.
No, I don't have anything else.
I do want to mention too, we reference all the time the data sheets, the projections, the ownership, all the stuff that Matt and the team do behind the scenes to build out this college football product. And we are running a flash sale. I didn't even know about this till maybe a half hour ago. What it means is it's a flash sale. It'll be gone in another 25 minutes. And what it is you can get inside the ropes for our college football weekly pass for a couple days for $3, 3 days for $3. I mean, come on now. So basically, if you want to use this info today, this is the way to get in the door. Maybe you just use it for the day or two and you don't re-up, and that's totally your decision. But we've got a really cool offer now. We want you to at least test this stuff out. So we've got that. My man, Mike, if you can just throw that link in chat for the people who want to sign up for that. It is a flash sale. It's also on our Twitter. You can always follow the Stochastic handle. If you want to do that, and while you're there, at JazzRazDFS, Matt _ Gajewski, all the good all the good stuff. Doesn't get better than a flash fail, though. Last question before we move to the next game. So would you stack Leary with Davis and a wide receiver? Is that viable?
Yeah, I think you can. Huge team total.
Yeah, you can consolidate all the touchdown equity that way, which is kind of a cool strategy. I don't mind that. Let's talk about a completely different type of game. This has national championship implications. Maybe it actually doesn't, but it is good teams. Texas A&M and Miami, they're up the top tier, and if whoever wins this game is going to get a lot of national recognition. The spread is taking money on the Miami side. It's down to 3.5, 51-point total. Neither team was tested in week 1. A&M played New Mexico. That doesn't mean anything. Wegman, what do we do with him, and what do we do with this A&M team?
Total in this game is pretty bad. So right away, I think Wegman is more of a GPP play. He ran a little bit, but I don't anticipate Wegman really like breaking the slate with his legs. This is a game that does have some sort of untapped potential. You've new OCs on both sides. Texas A&M played really fast in that first game, 26th in seconds per play, 55% pass rate. If they continue that, these guys are going to have some viability. Wegman's just 9K. So it's like, for an unknown quarterback, why is he priced so high? Evan Stewart, Noah Thomas, and Aeneas Smith are going to be your top 3 receivers. Moose Muhammad probably rotates a bit with Aeneas Smith here. I think there's an interesting dart throw in tournaments with Ruben Owens. What? A lot of people, and I bet the under on Amari Daniels prop on Prize Picks, but I think people think this is going to be a timeshare. Ruben Owens dominated snaps.
Everything all right?
He only had 7 touches overall, but he's a 5-star running back, dominated snaps. Every carry David Bailey had last week was just salting away that blowout game. So Ruben Owens, I think, is sneaky. Like, this guy could eventually work into a monster workload down the stretch. He's just by far the most talented back. This is his second game all time.
She's
though.
just got to stay away
now, week 4, I don't know. But worth a dart potentially in deep tournaments. I think that's
tell her to
it
come
for
and stay
Texas
alone,
A&M.
like stay by the side.
Be careful because the team total's low, but this is one of those games that probably has a larger margin for error than the other ones.
On the other side of this game, you've got Miami, Van Dyke, a talented team. I mean, it can't go worse than last year. What do you anticipate from them? Can they have success against this A&M defense? And if they do, through the air, or is it on the ground?
Man, Van Dyke's been disappointing now for a pretty large sample size. I don't love that, but he's also been good at times. Problem is he doesn't run at all. And total in the game's low. He needs 300 yards at this price, probably 7,900. I guess not as much as like Wegman, but you'd still like it. It's his only avenue to a ceiling. So for tournaments, I don't think the ceiling's great. Shannon Dawson at Houston didn't really play fast either, and he likes to run the ball. He uses like a bunch of multi-tight end sets, which is an issue, and that could be a problem for the receivers because they're projected to get back 2 of their hurt tight ends, Jaleel Skinner and Elijah Arroyo, today. Maybe that hurts like Jacoby George, Xavier Restrepo. They use Colby Young and Horton in a timeshare, so that was weird, but none of the receivers are expensive. If they continue playing every snap, that's George and Restrepo, they might be useful. Tournament dart throw, probably just a one-off. The backfield's a mess. They're rotating 4 guys. Donald Chaney played a lot at the end of the game, so at best, this is a 3-way committee. At worst, it's 4.
Well, let me tell you, chat. We didn't break strike because we couldn't hear the antics. I kind of wish we could. We were too busy discussing the game itself, but yeah, I have no idea. I think a little cross wires on the back end happens to the best of us here on these stochastic shows. But yeah, we're all business. You think that's gonna stop us from talking about the U? Come on now.
Apologies to everybody out there. I had a hot mic. Mother-in-law was sick as hell, and my wife came running in here, and so apologies. Let's get back to football.
I'll say this. I don't normally rewatch my own shows. But I might have to for this one. Anyway, let me just recap quickly from you. Any core in terms of like cash viable plays from A&M and Miami, or is this just a better real life game than maybe fantasy game?
Yep, you said it well.
Okay. I knew it was going to happen because I know the game's on the slate. I don't know if I was going to be prepared for it, but it's here. Iowa and Iowa State. We have to do this every year in week 2. It's disgusting. It's a disgrace to society. It's a 36-point total. Can't stand either of these teams. I'm ashamed to tell you that I bet this game. I bet Iowa just because Iowa State, they've got serious issue. And we'll talk about that in a second. Let's start with Iowa. They played Utah State to open the year. they exploded on offense for them. They put up a whopping 24 points. McNamara didn't do a ton. He ran for a whopping -9 yards. What are we doing here? Can Iowa manufacture anything viable today?
I don't know. They punted 7 times in that game. I want to say yes, but I mean, like, you couldn't score on Utah State. What in the world? So I'm not optimistic. Iowa State played an FCS team. I think this Iowa State team is horrific. So they're still probably better than Utah State, though. So, I mean, I don't know. Anyway, Cade McNamara is hurt. You can't play him. He's going to play through the injury, but whatever little mobility he had is gone. It's a quad injury. Luke Lachey is still cheap. He's going to see a million targets. The offense is so stupid. They run 2 tight ends every play, but like they didn't play their 4-star Caleb Brown. Last year's like top wide receiver, Nico Regini, they didn't play him. They used Seth Anderson on 82% of the routes. Like they can't even figure out who their best players are. The only thing I will say is Caleb Johnson should have a pretty large workload here. The only thing I'm concerned about is receiving. It wasn't great. It was still pretty split. Like Jason Patterson or Sean Williams didn't really run laps around him. But I'm trying to get a little bit of, I'm rerunning my crunch right now because I want at least a little bit of Caleb Johnson, but he's pretty tough to get to.
On the other side, so Iowa State opened with Northern Iowa. They were able to get past them relatively easily, 30-9. But I don't know if there's a team, Northwestern as well, for different reasons, that had a worse offseason than Iowa State. They've got guys suspended all over the place for gambling issues. Where are they at? I mean, are they ready to take on real, legitimate Power 5 teams?
No.
Okay.
This defense is probably going to be a problem for them. Iowa's defense is still good. I think they're going to use 2 quarterbacks. J.J. Cole's their freshman. Becht had cramping problems last game, so don't look at the timeshare and think that's necessarily what will happen moving forward, but I still think they use 2. Cartevious Norton has the best role on the team, but he's going to be smashing into that Iowa defensive line. They didn't use their best tight end, Easton Dean, 14% route rate. I mean, X out Iowa State's the easy answer.
Any take on how the game is played? Like I already said, I bet Iowa. I think that Iowa just legitimately might hold them to no points. I don't think Iowa State can move the ball even at home.
I did the same thing as you.
Dean Krause, apologies if I spelled your last name, but appreciate the super chat, my friend. Who is your favorite GPP QBs? You've talked about a couple that you mentioned are sneaky or pivots off Sims. You have a couple that come to mind?
Yeah, for deep tournaments, I'd be looking at Hartman, Howard. I still think Leary is good for tournaments. And then Hudson Card. I'd put them in that order. Also, Dart is pretty interesting too.
Let's talk about Dart. Let's talk about this game because I think this is one of the more important games on the slate. Mississippi's here. They just took on Mercer. You've got Dart, you've got Sanders, you've got real legit people in that backfield. I'm a huge fan of Judkins. We didn't really see him last week. He got some work, but 13 carries, and then he was hitting the sidelines after it was out of hand. What can they do today? And then we'll talk about Pratt and the injury on the other side.
I think they're going to, I bet this team, I think they're going to smash them.
Ooh.
And this offense is awesome. Dart's very mobile. I still have concerns about him playing the whole game. Sanders is behind him, wasting his last year of eligibility. So maybe they try to appease him, get him in a little bit here. Judkins has the best role in college football, arguably, when they're not smashing Mercer. He's a stone awesome play on this slate. Their receivers are good. You won't see Zakari. You won't see Caden Prescorn. So Trey Harris and Watkins played a ton. Their wide receiver 3 was a rotation. If you're throwing a dart there, it'd be Dayton Wade, but I don't feel particularly strong about that. I think you probably see some other deep guys like Aiden Williams play a bit. Tight end is interesting to me. They're using Kyron Heath and Michael Trigg in a rotation. They're both good receivers. So you're throwing darts on deep tight ends. That's where I'd go. But yeah, play Ole Miss guys. They're going to be contrarian outside of Judkins. Like Dart's not going to be heavily owned. Harris might be just because he basically had the same role as Watkins last week. Watkins actually played more, but Harris just caught the 4 scores. So you want a direct pivot. Watkins would be the guy.
Do you know if Zachary Franklin is playing?
He's not supposed to be.
Okay.
He was doubtful. I would be shocked if he plays.
Would that change anything, or you probably just stick with your evaluation?
I don't think he's playing.
Okay, that's easy enough. On the other side, do you think that Pratt is playing? And if he is he playable?
I think Pratt is playing. I have a lot of reservations. It's a lower body injury. He was limited in practice like the whole week. I mean, he got hit in the knee pretty badly. Part of his game is mobility. So I love Ole Miss's defense this year. This defense is nasty. They basically returned every solid contributor and then added a massive amount of talent. Some 5-stars came in, like Suntarine Perkins played awesome in that first game. And this is going to be tough for him. It's the toughest team he'll play all year. I have a lot of respect for Ole Miss's defense. Pratt is a guy I actually X'd out.
If he doesn't play, will you have any interest in Horton?
I think he's pretty good actually for a backup, but man, I would not want to be inserted in randomly into the hornet's nest of Ole Miss's defense. Maybe if this was like an AAC game against Rice, I don't know, then I would have more interest, but dang. Also, go Rice, wearing the shirt.
Wow. You think they can beat Houston?
Maybe, but probably not.
Houston does stupid stuff. In terms of Tulane, you mentioned they are at home, but they are going into the Lions Den nonetheless. Any skill position players that you want to highlight, or it's just a pretty bad spot?
Brazel's really cheap. Keys is pretty nice here too. I like Jaquan Jackson. Like, I love all their skill players, and I have 10% Brazel, 2.5% Jaquan Jackson. I can't find Keys, but I see him on my screen. So I have some Keys, just not a lot. 15%. Like his one-offs. And that's mostly just because I'm playing so much of the Ole Miss side.
Fair enough. I want to bring you back real quick to one quick question on the Utah game. Is Yasmin in play with Kuthi out?
For tournaments, yes.
Okay. Can you double stack Watkins and Harris with Dart?
Yeah.
Okay. A $4,600 and below receiver using Ole Miss stack.
Dayton Wade? If you want to stack him? Like, is he asking for a stacking option?
I'm not sure. I think so.
If you need a stack on that, I would use either Dayton Wade or Michael Trigg.
All right. We got 3 games left again. And then if you have any questions, we'll always be around. You can tweet us. This is why you want the tools. Again, the flash sale. You guys know all that's going on here at Stokastic. And again, owner's box for tomorrow. I'm telling you right now, click that link in the description. Even just save it for after the show. And then read through it and take advantage, get the sims, get the deposit match, do all that stuff. Let's talk about UTEP. UTEP, I feel like they played 8 games already. I already told you this and you laughed, and I'm ashamed to say it again. I watched from start to finish the entire UTEP Incarnate Word game. It was horrible. It was a battle, but they did win. And now they might play a worse team in Northwestern who played Rutgers, and it looked really bad. 1 point, 40-point total. I don't know what UTEP is doing. You know their coach is confused. He doesn't know what he's doing. Does that render Hardison and all these guys not playable?
Yes. I think the most interesting guy is Hankins. He's still in a committee, but he's way better than Burgess or Franklin. It seems like they got that figured out a little bit last week, but I still think it's pretty nasty. They're playing Northwestern, so I mean, the matchup's actually not bad. And then I would play Tyron Smith, but he's 7,600. Like, what in the world is he doing at 7,600?
I don't have answers for some of these guys. Northwestern, are they playable?
Cam Porter, maybe. We just don't know what the workload looks like. They didn't use him as a pass catcher. That's a problem. He's not playing the Evan Hall role. So I'm still like messing around with my crunch a little bit. It's like 95% finish. One of the things I've been mulling over is, do I want to X out Cam Porter?
Brutal. This game, again, I think we'll save some time and get it out. We had a couple rapid fire questions, and we'll try to sneak these in. Judkins and Dart in the same lineup.
Fine with it.
Howard and Sanote stack in a tourney. I think you're fine with that as well.
Yeah, I like that actually.
Watkins or Harris in a GPP?
Watkins.
Hartman and Key or Estime and Anaya Smith?
Estime side.
Last man and DK, 4,200 or less, already have Brazel.
4,200.
Yeah, it's pretty cheap.
Receiver?
I think it might just be flex.
Man, tough spot. The highest guy in my projections is AJ Henning, but actually, just kidding. It's a Dur Rahman Yassine.
There you go. Last one. Javon Antonio is not suited up for Colorado. Does that condense the targets to Horn, Weaver, and Hunter?
It's already pretty condensed, but yeah.
Look at that. If you haven't hit the like button, you should hit for that. That was like 8 random questions. You answered them flawlessly. Shout out to you. UNLV and Michigan, 2 games left. 37.5 point spread, 57.5 point total. I assume, talk about going into the Hornets' nest, that UNLV, who plays fast, is going to get mutilated here.
Yeah, X them out.
Okay. Now, what does Michigan do? McCarthy, we saw him, 26 of 30, very efficient. 3 touchdowns, did not run at all. More of the same here, and then Corum and Edwards.
This is the Ole Miss treatment. Play these guys. Just be careful how you do so. Like, I'd make some rules quickly, like don't play Corum, Edwards together. Don't play McCarthy, Edwards together, like stuff like that. But I'm playing Michigan guys. I like them all. I like Edwards the most. They eased Corum in a little bit in their last game. So if you're playing one, I would play Edwards. Probably none of them in cash, but at tournaments, this is very similar to Ole Miss.
Yeah, so just a lot of touchdown equity, a lot there to get to. We know the big time players for them. Best cash game QBs, it's got to be Sims and
it was Pratt. I think now it's McCarthy, maybe. I don't know. Like, there's not a second good cash quarterback. Maybe I don't like.
Yeah,
I might just run four running backs in cash. Honestly, as crazy as that is.
Let's get rid of this last game, and if we have any time left, we'll answer a couple more questions. Of course, we got you covered all day here on Stokastic. NFL strategy show a little later. We're gearing you up again. We have got you covered everywhere, and I just got to give a quick shout out because we both spend a ton of time over on OddsShopper YouTube. If you like betting and you're over there, head over to OddsShopper and check out all our deep dives on the spreads, best bets, everything there, as well as the Caesars deal, which is in the link below. If you're in a legal gambling state, sign up for Caesars. You're getting $250 in bonus bets, 5 $50 bonus bets once a week just for signing up and betting $50. A fantastic deal. You got to be 21 plus. If you have a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. But look at all the tools we've got over at OddsShopper, ready to help you out and make some wagers if you can do that. Now, last game, I don't even know why this is on the slate, but I guess it's cool. Marshall and East Carolina, 3-point spread, 44-point total. Teams that we are unfamiliar with mostly. What do we do? Talk to me about Marshall.
They have the most mispriced guy in the slate. Play Rasheen Ali. Play him everywhere. I think he's going to be under-owned even if he's at 75%. He is the best role on the slate. He is maybe the best role in college football. He's very active in the pass game, 72% of the routes. He's their do-it-all guy, and they're not playing like Ole Miss. They're favored in this game. Absurd. Cam Fancher, I think, is interesting for tournaments. Really cheap. He can move a little bit. I think he's bad as a passer. They played an FCS school, so he did throw for 268 yards, but put him in your pool. Sprinkle him if you want. I would use Cade Conley, their tight end, if doing that. But, man, Rasheen Ali, I think even in tournaments, he's one of these guys where you probably want to be overweight. I do not think people are going to play him enough. As crazy as that is.
That is kind of wild. On the other side, again, these teams have only played one game, so we don't really get a full indication. And East Carolina had to deal with Michigan's defense. How much better are they today than putting up the whopping 3 points?
Slightly better. This team still sucks. They use 2 quarterbacks. I mean, cheapers, man. Like, this is a bad team.
Is it that bad? I didn't know they were going to be that bad.
Maybe they'll be a little bit better, but for DFS, they rotated running backs, they rotated receivers. Jarek Gardner and Josiah Hatfield are the 2 guys you would use. They're just sprinkles, though.
All right, we got a couple minutes left. We had a question about Drake Dabney for Baylor. Still viable in tournaments, the tight end?
Yep, he plays like every snap. Guy's wagon.
Aaron Rasmus, friend of the show. Quick question. DK for cash. Black or Brazil for that open spot?
Black.
Quick question. What about Black? Yeah, we just talked about him twice. Sanders double stack with Sims run back. I think that's a cool strategy in tournaments. I don't mind loading up on that game. Another day, there's only one total, 65.5, Tulane and Ole Miss. Everything else is flirting with 60 or below today, despite having 13 games on the schedule.
Yep. We're in agreement, man.
Last question before we get out of here. Drew Seeley, anyone at the Stone Min that you could play if you were in a jam?
Oh, man.
It seems like no today.
I don't have anyone at Stone Min. Honestly, I would say no.
No, then don't force it.
I don't think you need to.
Yeah,
I think you're giving up too much if you're doing that.
There's always an opportunity cost for it. Any final thoughts for the people?
thank you for watching this. Appreciate being able to do it every week. Otherwise, 4 RBs more live and pretty big night slates, good night slate. So we'll have projections and everything for the night slate as well. If you would like to play, I would highly recommend it.
There you go. Again, save yourself some time and make yourself some money by getting our tools. There is no one I trust more in this industry. The man I do the show with, and he powers these. It's there. It's available. It's right in the link in the description. Take advantage of that. And again, stop by next week. Same time, same place. For me, for Matt, for Mike and his entire family today. Good luck. Enjoy the games. And of course, us three will talk to you next week.